in the next few days. We're recording in progress now. To reduce background noise, we request that you mute yourselves if you have not already done so, unless you're going to be asking a question later on. And if for some reason we lose our Zoom connection, as can happen, you can just use the same link to come back in, and we will continue after we've gotten everybody loaded again. So without further delay, we'd like to open, as we always do, with a prayer. For that, I'm going to call on our other host, Patty Kubala.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everyone. This is a prayer written by Abdul Baha about humanity. O thou kind Lord, O thou who art generous and merciful, we are the servants of thy threshold and are gathered beneath the sheltering shadow of thy divine unity. The sun of thy mercy is shining upon all, and the clouds of thy bounty shower upon all. Thy gifts encompass all. Thy loving providence sustains all. Thy protection overshadows all, and the glances of thy favor are cast upon all. O Lord, grant thine infinite bestowals, and let the light of thy guidance shine. Illumine the eyes, gladden the hearts with abiding joy. Confer a new spirit upon all people, and bestow upon them eternal life. Unlock the gates of true understanding, and let the light of faith shine resplendent. Gather all people beneath the shadow of thy bounty, and cause them to unite in harmony, so that they may become as the rays of one sun, as the waves of one ocean, and as the fruit of one tree. May they drink from the same fountain. May they be refreshed by the same breeze. May they receive illumination from the same source of light. Thou art the giver, the merciful, the omnipotent.
Thank you, Patty. And thank you again to all of you who are joining us. And now I'm going to turn this over to Tom Kubala. Tom, I do have a question though. I'm seeing the recording message. I'm wondering if everyone is seeing that, that's not going away, or if it's just me.
I really don't know.
If you're not seeing it, then it's just me. So no worries.
I'm seeing it.
Uh-oh.
If you click got it, it should go away.
I'm sorry, if you click.
Do you see a got it or an okay?
No, I don't. Oh, there it is. I just had to scroll down. Thank you. That's never happened before.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, Erica, if you don't mind putting up your first screen, and then I will introduce the three of you. This is an elevated conversation to look. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to introduce. This is an elevated conversation to look at how we love, how love is transformative. Transformation is uncomfortable. It is the language of grief, fear, anxiety, and purity. We are planting a seed that we hope will germinate for everyone, regardless of your belief system. We don't come with answers, and we won't leave with answers, but we hope the seed will grow a desire to work for the betterment of humanity and move us to action. The spiritual disease of racism requires us to work within our faith communities during the storm and remain grounded, bring healing. Erica Turner is the executive director of Bridge the Divide. She is an extraordinarily passionate advocate for building a world of racial justice and equity across all facets of her life. Focused on forging relationships in the virtually all-white suburban community where her family lives, works, plays, and works. Now, we are getting an echo, and I'm wondering how we might defeat.
If everyone that is on the call can just make sure to mute themselves. And if you have a laptop and a phone on, you'll have to mute both.
Excellent. Now, Kai Gardener-Mishlove. Kai is the current director of the Jewish Community Relations Council in Milwaukee. She is a firm believer in the African proverb, "It takes a village," and she acts on her Jewish faith every day by doing mitzvahs, or good deeds, and making sure that her life and work in the community is a meditation on God. Our third presenter is Glenda Battle. Glenda is engaged in community building through the Institute process. Her study of the Ruhi courses are put into action by educating others on the most vital and challenging issue, the elimination of race and racism for the betterment of humanity. And with that, you are free to go. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I am going to start out our presentation with my experiences as a Christian. And for those of you that know about the Christian faith, I was baptized when I was 19, and I'm just a couple of decades older than 19 now. So it's what I've known my entire life. And one of the, related to this conversation, one of the scriptures that I reference the most is the fact that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our hearts, all of our soul, all of our mind. And that's the first and greatest commandment. And then the second one is to love our neighbors as ourselves. So having the conversation about race and racism, especially in the mostly white suburb that I live in, it really is incumbent upon me to remind people that this is about love, not tolerance, not gritting your teeth and dealing with a person, but love. And to me, from conversations that I've had, from learnings that I've done, the opposite of love is not hate, which is what people, what you typically hear, right? The opposite of love, as I've learned it and started to believe it, really is apathy. So not caring about the other is the opposite of loving one another. And the Imago Dei, we say that all of the beings that God created, he made in his image. So if you love the Lord your God with all of your heart and mind and soul, then you should see in your neighbor that same face of God that you love. It's a commandment. So it is not let's choose or let's think about, it's a commandment. The other part of that, I guess, is a part of the parables and the ways that Jesus spoke to the people that he met, was really understanding who is your neighbor. If you say, okay, I'll love God and I'll love my neighbor, but who is my neighbor? Your neighbor is not the person that most looks like you or speaks like you or earns the same income that you do or worships like you do. So your neighbor is all of humanity. And this first and very basic commandment to love all of humanity, is a core tenet, right? The caring for others, not just loving a person as you love yourself, but actually caring for the widows and the orphans. And it seems to be fairly easy for Christians to understand that someone has to take care of the widows, someone has to look after the orphans. But we seem to get a little stuck when it comes to also caring for the strangers, the foreigners, the aliens, and whether that is a stranger from a different town, are they from a good neighborhood, air quotes, right? Are they an actual foreigner, as in not a local and new to your town, new to your country? Someone that is different than you, which again takes us back to the loving our neighbor. So caring for the orphans, the widows, and the strangers and the foreigners, again, is something that God has asked us to do. So when we talk about race, I think that we can also lump in there the stranger or the foreigner as seen by a person of a majority culture is a way that they can other someone who is of a different race, has a different skin tone, colorism, has a different ethnicity, is a part of a different culture. And we are not instructed to turn away those folks or despise them or mistreat them or ignore them, back to the apathy. We are to still love and care for them financially, making sure that they are fed, making sure that they are taken care of with their physical needs, shelter, and also for justice. So you are taking care to make sure that just actions are happening to all, not just those that look like you or are fortunate as you are. Complex emotions, for a discussion again, especially as it relates to myself. I don't pretend to be a theologian. I don't pretend to speak for others. Speaking for myself in understanding the complexity of Jesus and how he in human form, which was just like us, no longer the perfect being, but in human form, felt love, disappointment, loss, grief, sadness, referencing the story about Lazarus. And Jesus came to town speaking to Lazarus's family, crying and feeling their loss and their grief, knowing with all of his being that he was about to raise him from the dead. So as a complex emotion, this grief, this lament, this sadness, this crying, I believe that the Christians here on earth should feel not just the empathy that we kind of ask for on the surface, but the deep, deep grieving, the unspeakable love, and the overwhelming grief for all of humanity, our neighbors, the strangers, the widows, the orphans, the foreigners. If God could have those complex emotions and were made in his image when he was here as a human, then it's okay for us to feel those things. Throwing in their anger, as a Black woman experiencing racism, the hurt, the sadness, and the anger to have this repeated trauma, this repeated assault on my humanity and my dignity and the respect that I think I deserve. It's complexity. It's the both and. I can love God, I can love my neighbor, and I can still feel that pain and work through to try to improve and make sure others don't feel the same pain that I do. And for me, community is huge. The story of Bridge the Divide, as in the introduction, I'm the executive director of Bridge the Divide. My friend Heidi Wheeler is the associate director of Bridge the Divide. We met in community. in corporate worship together at church. We believe and understand that everyone does not have to be the same to be a community of people. And if we're going to live in community with other people, we have to see and accept other people for who they are, whether they agree with us, whether they do the same tasks that we do or not. So one of the examples that we discussed before is Saul and Paul. In the Bible, Saul was a Jew and had his name not necessarily changed, but changed how he was referred to as Paul in Greek society. So one of the things that we run into sometimes in the Christian community is, well, if you are not like me, so you are not a Christian, you do not believe as I do, we're not sharing the same doctrine, then we should be isolated, separated from one another. And that gives us permission to other that other person. Well, I'm not going to be in community with them because they don't believe as I do, so I don't have to. But if it's happening throughout the Bible, if Jesus is going out to people who were othered by the Christian community or the community that was following him, and these were folks that were an untouchable or not to be around. And if he can do that, and if we see in this example of Saul and Paul, it depended on, he interacted with different kinds of people, and he was using one name or another depending on who he was referring to or who was referring to him, and that he could still be in community with all of them. So we want to, for Bridge the Divide, go past the Midwest nice. We want to dig in. We want to have the restoration, ultimately reconciliation, that we didn't seem to feel in our place of worship. It didn't feel like our faith community understood that you could love God, still be a victim of racism, still want to change the system to better treat others, and be in community all together. It felt like those were all disparate things that could not occur at the same time. Ultimately, trying to have that conversation at church, trying to have a Bible study so that we could study the Word of God and see how it related to our current situation, and did not get the corporate buy-in in our faith community for those types of actions. And it ultimately led to me leaving the church that I was in when we started Bridge the Divide. It was supposed to be a community of the people that were closest to me aside from blood. We were all covered together, the blood of Christ, and the love and the compassion. I didn't feel. I couldn't feel that. I did not feel in community. And as I said, it ultimately led me to not leave God, but to leave the that community that I was in for worship. So I really, not even knowing for sure what reconciliation looks like, not knowing for sure on this earth anyway, what restoration will look like this side of heaven, but it's still something that we strive for. And again, we believe that you can do both. You can love God, you can hold to all of his tenets, and you can still reach for more, a better way to protect humanity, love humanity, and understanding that our humanity is all wrapped up in one another's. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to Kai.
Shalom, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. My name is Kai, as you know, and I'm going to speak to you about the tradition that's a part of who I am and very near and dear to my heart, and that is Judaism. So before I start with some of the quotes that I have above, on the screen, I just wanted to mention what Judaism is. It's a tradition and a spiritual practice, which, if practiced as it should be, it's a practice of ordering human existence, laws that govern human existence so that you're in alignment with the divine, with Hashem, with God, through various Jewish law, halakha, which is what it means in Hebrew. So it is stated that in Judaism that the world exists on three things: Torah, which is like the Hebrew Bible, work, and acts of loving kindness, or chesed in the Hebrew. To me, that is the kernel of what we're dealing with. The world existing on doing good deeds, loving kindness, and work. Some of the values that exist in Judaism include tikkun olam, repairing the world; chesed, as I mentioned before, loving kindness; tzedakah, charity, which is actually an ethical obligation. Also, tzedakah can be used to describe righteous behavior; and tzedek, which is justice. So when you're looking at these concepts and these values, and you're hearing some of the things that I'm saying about what what Judaism believes the world exists on, to me, it's clear that we are here to be in communion with each other, to love each other, and to do good as we were placed here to do, in alignment with the divine. Here are some of the quotes that I wanted to share with you from some of very, very well-regarded rabbis of blessed memory who are not with us anymore, but have left a profound impact on our community. The first one is Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who passed away really actually during COVID, not from COVID, but during the time that COVID started last year or 18 months. You know, my mind is blurry because of the time that we've been in this phase. And he states, freedom is won by making space for the people not like us. To me, that's a clear call to working for people, in alignment for people, making space for people, elevating people who are not like us. And then the next quote, it is not our task to conquer or convert the world or enforce uniformity of belief. It is our task to be a blessing to the world. That's another example of what we are here to be. And that is the blessing to the world. A light to the breaking down barriers between people or communities is through simple, unforced acts of kindness. One act can undo years of estrangement. And that's something that really, really strikes a chord with me. To me, it says that no matter what's happened in the past, we can undo that by going forward with positive actions and beliefs, and undoing with kindness, undoing hatred that's been sowed before. And now I want to move on to the next rabbi that I wanted to quote. This is one of my favorite quotes from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Let the good in me connect with the good of others until all of the world is transformed through the compelling power of love. Always help the persecuted. So to me, that says the same thing. There should be no racism because we should be working to assist other people, to uplift other people, to love other people. No one should be looked at any differently. Our brothers, our sisters are our brothers and our sisters, and should be treated as such, equal to who we are. Now, if we could move on to the next slide. This is what's really important to me. When we're talking about caring for the stranger or someone that's not like us, if you look at the Torah, it's mentioned more than 36 times. This is more than any other mitzvah, which is translated as good deed. More than 36 times in the Torah, it says that you should be caring for the stranger. That means caring for someone who may not be like you or from your family or from your community. In Deuteronomy 10:19, it says, love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In Exodus, you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This is the same thing. You should not wrong, you should not oppress, you should not be racist towards anyone, because you were once in a position of being oppressed. And then one of my favorite is the perky of all, also called Ethics of the Fathers, where it states, you are not required to finish the work, but neither are you permitted to desist from it. So this is what our Talmudic sages or wise people were saying, that the work should always be about doing what's best. You may not have the ability or the opportunity to finish, but that does not mean that you should remove yourself from it. So for example, if you are seeing racism being manifested in a community or some wrong that's happening, you may not be able to totally abolish it, but you should be actively engaged in working towards the good, working towards not allowing that to happen. So for me, when I see what happens often in communities, sometimes I see in various religions, what I would call something that's getting away from the kernel of what that religious belief and that spiritual belief and practice is. When people get away from what that is, they sometimes accommodate themselves to the social mores of the times. So for example, slavery. People would say, oh, there were plenty of Christian, slave owners who were feeling like this was something that was okay for them to do. They were using texts from the Christian Bible to say it was okay. To me, that's an example of that religion getting away from what it is. People who are practicing it, getting away from the kernel of it and accommodating themselves to the social mores of the times, which is not what religion should be or any sort of spiritual practice. It should always remain the same, the kernel of what it was. As I look around at some of the things that are happening in our community and the lack of unity and the lack of polarization, and the huge polarization that occurs, I often wonder if folks who are quoting spiritual texts or purport to be from a certain religious faith, if they know what the kernel is, what the core is of that religious faith. How can we get back to that? And how can we all be unified and work with each other to eradicate racism and all of the other isms that prevent us from being what we are, which is the divine image of God. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to having further discussion about this.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Glenda, and I am the Baha'i of the panelists. And so I wanted to share a quote, and you all have to excuse me. I'm going between, I'm using my phone, so I'm having, and hopefully there's no glare on from my glasses. And I like to start with this quote. O thou who hast an illumined heart, thou art even as a pupil of the eye, the very wellspring of the light, for God's love has cast his rays upon thy inmost being, and thou hast turned thy face toward the kingdom of thy Lord. Intense is the hatred in America between Black and white, but my hope is that the power of the kingdom will bind these two in friendship and serve them as the healing balm. Let them not look upon a man's color, but upon his heart. If the heart be filled with light, that man is nigh unto the threshold of his Lord. But if not, that man is careless of his Lord, be he white or be he Black. And this is from the selections of the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. And Abdu'l-Baha was The master, he was the son of Baha'u'llah, who's the founder of the Baha'i faith. And he's also referred to as the covenant. And so in the Baha'i faith, the people of African descent are referred to as pupil of the eye. And I'd like to share another quote that says, I liken you to the pupil of the eye. You are black and it is black, yet it becomes the focus of light. And so to me, that causes us to consider how race is somewhat a dividing force in the United States. But at the same time, it requires us to raise our level of consciousness. It requires us to do self-investigation. It requires us to meditate and reflect, regardless of what religion we belong to, because all of the holy writings refers to love, love of stranger, love of neighbor, love of enemies. And so the question for me is, what is this bridge that is required for us to move past this divide? In the Baha'i faith, we talk about the oneness of humankind. We recognize the teachings of 9 manifestations of God. We see others as our brother. And so if we all are talking about love, what does that mean? How do we get to that place? And so to me, one of those is the rectitude of conduct. And at the base of conduct is justice. Are the principles that most of our religions talk about. Peace, love, kindness, generosity, compassion. And so those are the things we are to show forth toward one another. And earlier it was mentioned about seeds being planted. And using that analogy, when it rains, the rain comes, it doesn't water one individual seed. It waters the ground underneath which we find the seed. And from the seed receiving the rain, it breaks through the soil. It becomes a root. It may become a flower for the fragrances and the beauty that we see around us. It may become a tree that provides us with nourishment because of the fruit that it bears. Maybe vegetables that we eat for the nourishment of our bodies. The sun, it shines upon the seed, it shines upon the land. We all benefit from these elements that God has created. He provides for us collectively. And so this false dichotomy that we call race, what purpose does it really serve relative to our souls? And so that leads me to the next point of prayer. And in our religions, we say prayers. And in the Baha'i faith, prayer is communion with God. And in prayer, we are asking to be enhanced of certain latent qualities within us. For example, there's a prayer for spiritual qualities. And one part of it says, I am, oh my God, but a tiny seed, which thou hast sown in the soil of thy love. That is profound. And we are created in God's likeness. We're created with capacities. But at the same time, we're required to pray. And prayer is relative to service, is relative to action, is relative to faith. In the Baha'i faith, work is worship. We can have any occupation that we choose. And for most Baha'is, we usually go into careers for the betterment of mankind, humankind, humanity. We usually engage in work that provides service. And in the Christian faith, it says, faith without work is dead. So we have to work. We have to engage in work. We have to engage in service to eradicate this problem of race that keeps us divided, that keeps us in conflict unnecessarily. And with race are the limit, and so for reckoning involves justice. Reckoning involves spiritual principles. Reckoning involves our obedience. Reckoning requires us to meditate, reflect. In the Baha'i faith, there's consultation and accompaniment. There's no clergy. So I will learn this. So the rectitude of conduct is relative to how we pattern our lives. And in patterning our lives, we have consultation where we allow each individual to have an opportunity to share their thoughts, their ideas. Going through the process of consultation, there is disagreement. However, in the Baha'i faith, we see consultation as the process of investigating truth, as the process of sharing ideas, conflicting ideas. Those conflicting ideas are like swords clashing together, but they're sharpening each other. And as you know, I guess similar to brainstorming. But at the end of the process of consultation, there is agreement. So the investigative process, the majority have consensus. And then once we finish that process, we're supposed to leave with all hearts and minds cleared. So there's no backbiting. We shouldn't be bringing up the conversation or the topic again, because we've gone through that process, and that process at that particular point is closed. And so going through the process of consultation, we learn to accompany one another. We build relationships. We should be growing together in our disagreement, because we're learning that it's not personal. We shouldn't have ill feelings with one another because we disagree. So it allows us to build our capacity spiritually, and also should help us detach from the way it should assist us in detaching from our personal perspectives. And so the last point is freedom from racial prejudice. In the Baha'i faith, we shouldn't have any prejudice. So to be free of racial prejudice, I shouldn't prejudge anyone because I don't know the individual. I shouldn't be able to say anything about someone because of the color of their skin, because that's me forming some position that I haven't investigated, I haven't had consultation on, nor have I accompanied the individual. So it's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for understanding. It's an opportunity for learning. And these are the principles, I think, that is at the root of whatever religion we are. That goes back to our love for God. God has no love or no disposition to one particular race of people. And God loves us equally. He consistently sends messengers to guide us in our growth and our development through the ages. The Baha'i faith teaches that every thousands of years, there's a messenger, a manifestation from God to provide the spiritual guidance that man needs at that particular point in civilization, or for the development or the advancement of civilization. And so when we are obedient to our holy writings, we fulfill the prophecies, the destinies, and we have that brotherly love that's necessary to take us and advance us and bring us closer together and help us become more enlightened. Because when racism prevents individuals from reaching their full potential, not only is it an impediment for the one that's being oppressed, it's also an impediment for the oppressor. Neither race has the opportunity to become that divine purpose. Race, people, group, whatever word we want to put to it, because basically at the end of the day, we should be a tribe of people collectively. We're all world citizens, and we should be all working to be collectively our brother's keeper. And I don't know what the language is in each religion, but each religion has something similar to what the Christians refer to as the golden rule, but we don't call it a golden rule. So I would like to conclude with this. So when it comes to race, religion, and reckoning, it requires reciprocity and it requires cooperation. The advancement of the race has not occurred at the expense of human individuality. A social organization has increased the scope of the expression of the latent capacity in each human being, and it has corresponding responsibility. So what happens to one happens to the other. We're all the sum of the parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda and Kai, and thank you all very much from Topics of Our Time for inviting us here. We'd like to open it up for questions. I'll stop sharing so we can see faces, but whether you want to raise your virtual hand or raise your physical hand and ask some questions.
I'll
I
start
just
with
wanted to
one.
comment.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I am just in listening. I want to thank everyone here, especially Erica and Glenda, for sharing, because during both of their presentations, I was thinking about all of the parallels within my own faith. And so it's just it's beautiful to me to see all of this, to recognize all of this. And I'm just thinking in my head, where did we go wrong? Why does this, if we're all feeling this way, and if our spiritual faiths are all, dictating this, what went wrong?
And that was my question is how can we come back together in a way that works in a natural order? I mean, just having different religions by themselves, puts us in different categories. Yes, we all worship the same God, but there are differences. So how can we use this to come together? And then the other part of my question, and anyone can answer, is that we're finding more and more with research. I think it's over 50% now of, well, I'm not sure the generations, but let's say about 34 and under are not part of any religion. And therefore, but yet seem to really care and are really out there and are really doing works of God and really doing a lot to try and eradicate racism. So it's such a wide group of people. But how do we include them also? So I guess I have two questions out there that anyone can respond to. And thank you, you three. You were wonderful. This was so enlightening. Thank you.
This is Erica. One thing that just popped up in my head right away is a song that I used to sing. Boy, it's probably been like 20 years ago with Toby Mac. And I remember that the very beginning of the song, it said the thing that pushes away most people from Christianity is Christians. So I think a part of that is the actual doing what we say we're going to do. If we're following, and if you are doing what God says, and God says to love and care for others, then the modeling you have to actually do it. It's not just the lip service. And I think that to your other point is, how do we get stuck? And like Kai said, how are we not doing those things? And I think some of it is the culture that's come in to our respective religions, right? We always had a struggle in our pulpit, which is about God. It's about the shepherd that God sent to lead our flock. And it has, an American flag and a certain president you're supposed to vote for. Like, how did that get in there? That's the culture that's bleeding into our religion. So that was just the comment that came to first for that for your question, Pat. So leaving it open to everybody else, please respond.
I think
I was gonna say-
it goes back to disobedience. Or it goes to the issue of fear, not willing to take action or speak up. And sometimes, we don't want the spotlight on us, because when we are obedient, we're different. We're going to stand out because we aren't doing what everybody else is doing. And so that takes courage. Go ahead, Kai.
Sorry. I was going to say, I agree. And when I think about it, we're all born into this world not racist. And I still believe that folks are genuinely, people are good. People are good. It's just that along the way, we've been socialized into believing certain things about who the other is and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's caused all of these problems. And I don't think that a person has to necessarily believe in God or belong to any sort of religious faith to follow the golden rule of treating everyone with kindness and with respect. That's just a part of the social contract of living in a society, in a world with other people. And somehow, that's not something that folks remember. Like I was thinking about the question about the folks in a certain generation or younger generations who don't believe in God or don't belong to a religion. How is it but they're doing good stuff. So how do we elevate that when they're young and when they're growing up? How do we elevate that and say, my own bias is I want people to believe in God, but I'm not going to push that on anyone. I think it's much more important for people to be good people and to do good works. Ultimately, that is what God wants, for us to do. So I think people coming from different religions, if we're thinking about how different people from different walks of life, different viewpoints, how do we all come together? I think it's with patience and love, understanding that we're all coming from a different viewpoint, but that does not, and maybe we're coming with baggage from previous negative interactions that we've had with each other, but that should not dictate what the future is. That we can still come together and work for the common good, because we're all, like you were saying, Glenda, parts of a whole that's greater than us.
Looks like David Lee or Rennie, one of you has your hand up.
Well, I just had a question. I just would like to know a little bit more about how the three of you found each other and how you've been able to work together, and if you've been able to use your efforts to reach out to youth, how you've been able to manage that.
I would say that meeting Kai and Glenda was a part of our beloved community. It's a part of the trying to figure out how to do the best that we can for as many as we can. and that's how we met, because exactly what you said, we're not in the same faith building. We're not necessarily seeing each other in other capacities, but in this building beloved community, we came across each other because that's what we were all trying to do in our own little spaces, right? Our sphere of influence, our circle, our locus of control. And that's, I think, is where it's one of the places that we get stuck, at least with my faith tradition, in if you're not like me, then we need to not be in community with each other, because you're not doing the right thing because you're not like me. If you were like me and you were in the Christian church, then we could work together. And so there's a lot of barriers on even knowing what community is and what love can look like across all of those different lines. And we're putting up barriers, stopping the collaboration that could be happening, interfaith, intergenerationally.
Kathy has her hand up. Go ahead, Kathy Wurzer.
You gotta unmute, Kathy.
Sorry about that. You all three come from 3 different faith communities, but you're all 3 African American. And I know that you know our history of race, the illusion of race and racism in our country, and the current injustices that exist. And I guess and then you're also talking to at least mostly a white audience. I don't know if everybody here is white, right? But you're talking to mostly a white audience. And so I guess I'm wondering, what would you like to see as far as us centering African Americans, not helping African Americans, but centering African Americans? Those, who continue to experience the othering and continue to experience oppression. What would you like to see white people do to center African Americans?
Well, speaking for me, I would like to see our white community analyze what is whiteness, what the construct of whiteness. So for example, if we're going to look at the Jewish community, folks do not realize that the Jewish community, folks came here escaping oppression, escaping pogroms, because they were not considered, they were considered a race that was not a race that the Germans wanted or that the Russians wanted. So when the Jewish community immigrated here, there's a racial hierarchy that they walked into of proximity to whiteness. Every group faced this. The Irish became white when they came here. The Italians became white when they came here. And because of that racial hierarchy, that's something that we forget. So I would say first that needs to be examined. Why is this? Which race is not even it's not even a biological construct. What does that racial hierarchy serve? What is the purpose? Who's disenfranchised and who isn't? And why is that? So as a Black woman, who comes from a tradition that has become white since being here, according to certain people, I also look at the fact that the Jewish community is about 15% Jews of color, folks who are not considered to be white, whatever that is. And so because of that, I say to my community, you listen to folks within our community who are like me, who are Asian, who are Latin, who are African American, who are Caribbean born, who are African born, and listen to their voices, what they're experiencing, and listen to it with an open heart and an open mind and not a fear. Because a lot of times the pushback is based on fear and fear of what you think you are losing if you're in the status quo. So when I look around and I see folks pushing against things that are or negating the experiences of Black people or people of color in this country, it's a pushback. It's based on a fear of losing some sort of power and an insecurity about that. So we have to look at our history, accurately, and have those authentic conversations with our family and our friends in our community, our places of worship.
And Kai, if I can add, also our place of work. We spend a lot of time at work, so we definitely need to have it, in that environment.
I don't know if any of you know Rhonda Hill. She is with the ELCA, but she has done lots of conversations between interfaith groups. And one of the things that she talks about is we've got to stop with the myths that we're telling ourselves. So for me, the answer to that question would really be about learning history, accurate history, because our memories are so short. You know, if we're going to talk about slavery, and I've heard people in the Christian church say, well, you know, we were mostly benevolent slavers, really. And I mean, what we were really doing was trying to save the souls of those savages. So we introduced them to Christ and taught them how. And if you would go past the myth of that and dig deeper to say, how did you teach Africans that you stole from their homeland and owned as property and took them into a place of worship and chained them to the pew so they wouldn't run away because they were, you know, their dignity and respect and their agency was lost? How do you tell the story of our history in the Christian church without telling the whole truth of that story? So the pain and the grief that I consistently feel with my brothers and sisters in Christ is really not being seen, the history not being told. We retell the myths that are not true. So you can't then see my pain because you can brush it off because it's really not that bad. So the history and the experiences that we need people in our across the continuum of all of these faiths to listen, learn, remember, look past the myths for the actual history of how things happened. And then maybe you can hear us now. I mean, I feel like I shouldn't have to beg someone that's a blood brother and sister to me in Christ, beg you to hear my pain and lament with me and help me make it better. But that's kind of where I feel like we are.
So I guess for me, starting with the meaningful conversation of what centering would entail, because that is, it can be so different relative to the community in which one finds oneself. And then two, that might be like, that's a concept I think for most people that most may find challenging, almost like universal peace. Because things have gone on so long, a particular way, people can't imagine the change. They can't imagine things being different because it's always been that way. And then two, we have to invoke forgiveness, even in centering. Because again, I think even to center, it can be a very painful process because the wounds run so deep. The pain has not been released, and it can be definitely overwhelming, I think. So centering requires a lot of healing and forgiveness in the conversation and the defining of centering.
Don Niederfrank, you had a question.
Like,
Well, I just wanted to make two quick comments. One was to recommend for Christians a book that I'm reading secondhand, in the sense that if anybody who's married to somebody who reads a book and then they keep reading parts of it to them because it's such a good book. My wife is reading White Too Long, which is about basically not just the American Christian Church complicity in racism, but its active pursuit of it. And then what I wanted to ask the panelists is to talk about the faithful place of anger. I mean, we all sound, we're all really nice small town Midwesterners, but some of this, is outrageous. Well, anyway, I'll be quiet.
So if I can speak to, so for me, there's something that I call nice, nasty. Sometimes you can be too nice. It's not genuine. It's going through the motions, and literally it makes me sick. And so for me, I think that's part of my test. That's part of my challenge. So how do I build the capacity to address the issue with less spikes, that tone in my voice? Because I am truly a Black woman. I will wear a t-shirt that says angry Black woman. I'm proud of it. But pride is a sin. So I'm working on that piece of it. So I think I'm going through the caterpillar stage to become the butterfly. But I am beginning to let people know, ooh, you know, like when they say, you say, I can't remember, in conversation, you say, ouch, and something else. When you hear something that causes you a little discomfort. So I'm doing a lot of ouch, letting people know, I don't like that. And so, and in these conversations, it is leading toward a meaningful conversation, because sometimes, you know, I hear a lot of people tell me, oh, that's so negative. And I'm like, well, baby, it's the negative energy that makes the car move. And therefore the wheels go round and round. So it's changing the meaning and the usage of words. Is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? So basically, anger is energy. And the issue is, how do we channel it? So instead of people being turned off, let's become scientists and let's learn how to transform it. So that's my commentary.
Thank you. One of the things that I talked about, you know, earlier is the complexity of emotions that for Glenda's nice nasty, that mine is the toxic positivity. Like, why, what is it that says you have to turn this ugly thing that is racism into some kind of positive way to move people forward? Like, it's the both and. I love God and I am so angry and I am so hurt by what you're doing. And if Jesus can flip tables, then I can very calmly and methodically say to you, that's not right. Don't do that. Don't say that. Let me help you, you know, from my mom's teachings, you know, whatever problem you bring a solution. So I realize that you don't understand what you said. I'm going to tell you that it was wrong. And then I'm going to try to help you figure out a different way. So you have the ouch and you have the oops, right? Oops, you said something that really was, you know, offensive to this person. Don't stand for 10 minutes and fight with me about why it was offensive and who says. If you accidentally step on somebody's toe, you say you're sorry and you try to avoid doing it again. If you keep going back repeatedly, then that's the willful blindness that tells me, oh, you really don't care and you really aren't planning to stop. And I can still feel that pain, not let it steal my joy, because that's another thing that pops up. Well, but if you don't seem so angry about it, then it must not be that bad. Well, no, I am learning through my Christian faith that my behaviors, my outward behaviors and how they are seen and how they affect other people are something that I should, you know, not having the sharp forked tongue, right? So I try very hard. I work very hard to not do that, but it doesn't mean that it's fine just because I don't curse you out every time I hear that. I still feel the pain. And again, if we are brothers and sisters, then me feeling pain should be important to you. I mean, you should say, I don't want you to feel that pain. I don't want you, but it doesn't, not stealing the joy so that I turn bitter and ugly and angry all the time. But certainly if Jesus can flip tables, I can kick over a chair or two and then, breathe and then come back down and figure out what kind of solutions we can make.
I
Kathy,
think it's
you had a question?
important for us to call things for what they are, regarding, this Midwest niceness. My family's from the South, and my mother used to always say, you always know where someone stands in the South, not in the Midwest. So I think it's important to call things out for what they are. Having an authentic conversation requires you to not be afraid for what you're going to hear. The burden of this work can't be on people of color because it's very, very taxing. I'd like to see folks within their communities talking to people within their sphere. So if you are a person, let's say a person of the white community with a white family, are you having these conversations with your children, with your neighbors? Thanksgiving is coming up. Maybe you're going to have a conversation with that aunt that you don't always get along with politically. How can you bring her over to the side that's more understanding? And then, lastly, anger is productive if we can use it as a catalyst to move towards something. If we're living in Cedarburg, Whitefish Bay, Glendale, whatever, what are our neighbors talking? What are they saying about Milwaukee? Why is it that we have certain things that we have access to in our community that others don't have in Milwaukee? What is that language? Is your place of worship in an active relationship with a church in the inner city? Are you doing things that's a place to start? Look at your circle of friends. Is it a diverse circle?
Tom, how are we doing as far as questions? Do you see hands up, or how are we doing time-wise? You're on mute, my friend.
Sorry. Kathy Ayer had a question, and we're doing okay. We have maybe five or 10 more minutes at the most.
Okay, real good. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I feel like since the martyrdom of George Floyd, that our society has inched a bit toward justice, and the world. I think that it was like nobody was able to just be blind to what happened. And I think that it was an inching towards justice. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for our panel, our lovely panel? Anyone?
All right. Well, thank you all so very much. As the three of you were offering your perspectives, and like you, Kai, I was seeing, all these similarities. It's so wonderful to see them side by side and have them, brought forth with such clarity. I kept thinking, how can we take this on the road? Because everyone needs to see that side by side comparison. We all believe in the same God. He's bringing his message ever forward, teaching the same things in different ways and offering, newer and various perspectives on how to approach these things that he has commanded of us. And so it's wonderful to see this all together, and we thank you so very, very much. So our time is up, and what a blessing it has been to have you all with us. Our talk tonight marked the end of Cedarburg Baha'i Community's Topics for Our Time series. We hope that you'll reflect on what you've heard and continue to seek answers to your questions. If you'd like to listen to some of the untouched recordings of previous talks. Let's see, I think Tom is going to put up somewhere on there we have a YouTube channel link. If you get out your pen and paper, you might be able to jot that down. I'm lost. There we are. The Baha'i faith we're in the Baha'i faith, we're always trying to bring people together, build relationships, and find unity for social action and for change. We do this in small consultative study groups and through children's classes and junior youth empowerment groups, and also through collective prayer and fellowship in interfaith gatherings. And of course, we always see lots of individual initiatives like this one tonight, these talks that are designed to enhance understanding and strengthen bonds of friendship. You're all always welcome and invited to participate in any Baha'i activity. And you should feel free to contact either me or Patty Kubala if you're interested in pursuing information in Cedarburg or in this area, or just general information. You can also go find more information about the Baha'i faith at www.baha'i.org. Since it's a newer religion, maybe some of you are less familiar with that. So that brings us to a conclusion. We thank you for your attention, for your presence here. We love seeing your smiling faces and having you participate with your questions. It enriches us all, and we hope to spend time with you again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your
Thanks so much.
participation
Yeah.
and your
Thank
energy.
you
and
so
your love.
much for giving your time.
Bet.
Bye now.